Most financial damage doesn't come from dramatic mistakes. It comes from one quiet decision that feels reasonable at the time. It doesn't trigger alarms. It doesn't feel reckless. It doesn't even feel like a decision at all. It feels like postponement. At some point, almost everyone makes the same choice. They decide to deal with money later. Not because they don't care, but because later feels safer than now. Later feels calmer. Later feels less urgent. Later feels like a future version of yourself will be better prepared. That future version rarely arrives. The decision to postpone is rarely framed as a mistake. It's framed as responsibility, as patience, as maturity. I'll take care of this. Once things are more stable, what makes this decision dangerous is not its content. It is its invisibility. There is no single moment where postponement announces itself as harmful. There is no notification, no warning, no immediate cost. Postponement turns time into an adversary. While you wait, time continues to price risk. It compounds. It recalibrates what enough means. Money that is not engaged does not stay neutral. It becomes passive in a system that rewards participation. This is why postponement quietly erodes financial outcomes, not through loss, through absence. Absence from growth, absence from learning, absence from adaptation. People often believe that avoiding decisions protects them from mistakes. It is exposure to a different set of risks, risks that feel less threatening because they are slower. Slow risks are the hardest to respect. They do not demand attention. They do not force action. They simply accumulate. Postponement allows you to avoid discomfort today, but it concentrates discomfort in the future. The longer a decision is delayed, the heavier it becomes, not because the decision changes, but because the consequences stack. By the time action feels unavoidable, options are fewer. Trade-offs are harsher. This is how a single habit creates long-term damage without ever feeling like a mistake. Postponement also distorts perception. It makes progress feel binary. Either everything is decided or nothing begins. But financial progress is rarely binary. It is incremental. It benefits from imperfect starts. Waiting for readiness assumes that readiness is a state you enter. In reality, readiness is built through engagement. You do not become comfortable with decisions by avoiding them. You become comfortable by making small ones repeatedly. Postponement prevents that process. It keeps every decision large, every step heavy, every move emotionally charged. This is why people who delay financial decisions often feel overwhelmed later. They are not overwhelmed by complexity. They are overwhelmed by accumulated delay. The market does not punish delay immediately. It simply keeps moving. And when you re-enter after a long absence, you are forced to catch up in an environment that has already changed. Prices are different. Expectations are different. Your own tolerance for uncertainty may be lower. Late engagement feels riskier, not because risk increased, but because time reduced your margin for error. This is the hidden tax of postponement. Another reason this decision is so damaging is that it feels virtuous. Society often rewards caution. Waiting is rarely criticized. Inaction attracts little attention. Action, on the other hand, is visible. It invites judgment. It can be evaluated, criticized, questioned. So people learn early that postponement is socially safe. It is easy to defend, easy to explain. I'm not ready yet. By delaying, you feel like you are managing risk. You feel like you are choosing not to choose. But choosing not to choose is still a choice. It simply hands control to time and external conditions, conditions that do not prioritize your comfort. This decision becomes especially dangerous during periods of uncertainty, when information is noisy, when outcomes are unclear, when volatility increases. Ironically, these are the environments where engagement matters most, not reckless engagement. Structured engagement, postponement during uncertainty feels prudent. But uncertainty is not an exception in financial systems. It is the default. If you wait for uncertainty to disappear, you are waiting indefinitely. This is why postponement quietly ruins finances, not because it is wrong in every situation, but because it becomes a habit. Habits shape outcomes more than individual decisions. Once postponement becomes the default response, it expands. It moves from investing to saving, from planning to reviewing, from adjusting to committing. Everything becomes something to deal with later. Later becomes a moving target. The future self is always assumed to be more capable, more informed, more decisive. But the future self inherits the consequences of today's delay, not additional clarity. This creates a loop. Postponement reduces experience. Reduced experience increases hesitation. Increased hesitation encourages further postponement. Breaking this loop is difficult because it does not feel urgent. Nothing is wrong, enough to demand immediate action, until years pass. And then the cost becomes visible, not as a single loss, but as a gap. A gap. The gap between where you are and where you expect it to be. A gap that cannot be closed quickly. This is why postponement is more damaging than many visible mistakes. Visible mistakes teach. They correct. They adjust behavior. Postponement teaches nothing. It delays feedback. Feedback is essential for improvement. Without it, intuition stagnates. The longer you avoid decisions, the less calibrated your judgment becomes. This is not a call for impulsive action. It is a call for honest engagement. Engagement does not require certainty. It requires structure. Structure reduces emotional weight. It breaks large decisions into smaller, repeatable actions. It prevents postponement from becoming the default. Without structure, postponement feels endless. With structure, action becomes manageable. The goal is not to eliminate risk. It is to distribute it across time. It pushes everything into a narrower future window. Distributed risk is survivable. Concentrated risk is destabilizing. This is why small, imperfect actions often outperform perfect plans. They create momentum. They generate feedback. They build tolerance. Postponement stops momentum before it begins. The market does not reward intentions. It rewards participation. Participation does not mean constant action. It means not stepping away indefinitely. Strategic waiting has criteria. It has limits. It has a timeline. Postponement has none. It extends until discomfort forces intervention. By then, choices are constrained. This is the quiet damage of one decision. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Once you recognize postponement as a decision, it loses its innocence. It becomes something you can examine, question, constrain, and that awareness alone changes outcomes, because when postponement is no longer invisible, it no longer controls the process. One more aspect deserves attention. Postponement often hides behind busyness. People feel productive. They optimize. They reorganize. But productivity without direction does not compound. It distracts. Activity replaces progress. Motion replaces movement. This illusion is comforting. It feels like engagement without risk, but time does not distinguish between motion and movement, only outcomes. By the time this becomes clear, catching up requires more effort, more stress, more urgency. This is why starting earlier with imperfect clarity is often the least risky path, not because it avoids mistakes, but because it spreads them out. And mistakes that are spread out are survivable. This is not financial advice. It is a way of thinking about time, decisions, and the hidden cost of always choosing later. There is a subtle emotional payoff to postponement that keeps it alive. It protects self-image. As long as you haven't acted, results cannot contradict your intentions. You can believe you would have made the right choice. You can imagine better timing, better preparation, better conditions. Postponement preserves that narrative. Once you act, the narrative becomes reality. And reality is messy. It allows you to keep ideal outcomes intact in your mind. But imagined outcomes do not compound, only real ones do. The longer postponement continues, the harder it becomes to replace imagination with experience. Because experience brings limits. This is another hidden cost. Postponement delays self-correction. It delays growth, not just financially, but psychologically. The habit of postponement trains avoidance. It teaches the mind that discomfort should be escaped, not managed. Over time, this spills into other areas. Decisions feel heavier. Commitments feel riskier. Change feels threatening. What began as a financial delay becomes a behavioral pattern. Breaking that pattern requires reframing, not forcing action, but redefining what action means. Action does not have to be decisive. It can be exploratory. It can be reversible. It can be small. But it has to exist. Once action exists, postponement loses its monopoly. Time becomes a collaborator instead of an enemy. This is the real shift. From waiting for the future to deliver clarity. When decisions are delayed, people rewrite the past. They convince themselves that waiting was inevitable, that action would not have changed anything. This revision is comforting. It removes responsibility. It protects the ego. Learning requires acknowledging that different choices were possible. Postponement blurs that recognition. Over long periods, this creates stagnation, not because opportunities were absent, but because they were never engaged. Time does not reward potential. It rewards interaction. The most damaging part is that postponement often feels temporary. People believe they are waiting for a signal, a moment, a feeling. That signal rarely arrives, because signals are usually visible only in hindsight. By the time clarity appears, it is already priced in. The opportunity has shifted. The conditions have changed. This is why postponement quietly ruins finances, not through a single error, but through repeated deferral. Deferred decisions accumulate until the weight becomes obvious. By then, the cost is no longer abstract. It is lived. This is not meant to create urgency. It is meant to create awareness. Awareness turns postponement into a conscious choice. And conscious choices can be constrained. Once constrained, postponement stops being default. It becomes intentional. And intentional delay is different from avoidance. This distinction matters, because only one of them quietly ruins outcomes. Most financial decisions aren't about information. They're about how you think. If this perspective resonates, You can subscribe to the channel for future videos.